back. The need to break the perennial jinx Nigeria's power sector, despite the huge potentials and reservoirs which had remained largely dormant over the years, once again comes under a close review. Like we promised, I'm delighted to have the co-founder and executive director of Sahara Group, Mr. Tonye. He joins us from our Lagos studio. Thank you for joining us, Tonye, from Lagos. Glad to have you.
How are you?
Good, fine.
Excellent having you. Can you hear me?
Fantastic. Yes, I can hear you very clearly. Like I did at the beginning, we did apologize once more. Apologies for the logistics challenge we had. But let's just get on with the program immediately. Why has the issue of power generation and distribution become such an, one would describe it as intractable and never-ending crisis over the years, over past governments?
Well, I believe that part of the problem that we've had over the years is that all the different parties involved in the power chain have not really sat down to agree on what is important and what should be done. Some very hard decisions needed to be taken, which were not taken.
All right, let's look immediately at the Amendment Act, which was signed into law by the president. What do you make of it? It sounds, let me not use the word who.
I'm not sure the studio can hear me anymore.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Good,
Yeah,
fine, wonderful. I was talking about the, Amendment Act, Electricity Act that the president signed into law 18 months after. I mean, one could say that this is looking good. But then 18 months after Tinubu signed the Electricity Act, 27 of the 36 states are yet to start implementing it. Is this a case of inactiveness on the part of the governors or the states not being proactive? Or is it just states being lousy or something more?
You know, a lot of people have always thought that power was a very simple thing to deal with, but it's a bit more complex. So first of all, the law in itself and the decentralization of the power sector, especially the regulatory arm of it, and then giving the states the capacity to do what they're doing, I believe is the right way. That's the right direction. But then when you find out and you look deeper into it, you then find out that not all the states have the capacity to run and regulate. There has to be a knowledge gap that has to be closed if regulation is going to be done properly.
That it may be a question of resources in terms of funds that states are, dodging it because of the funds. Looks like the three groups, the chairman. Okay, go on with that before I add this. Yes, go on.
No, I wouldn't quite agree that it's just an issue of funds. One of the things that privatization was meant to do and regulatory environment was meant to improve is to enable private investment come into the power sector. And this is critical because once you can make the sector viable and you can show that private investment can come in and it's safe and that revenue can be made and a profit made out of the system, then you will find an investor flowing in. When you don't find investments coming in, then it means that there is something still wrong with the formula. Now, the federal government has decentralized, hoping that the states will then be able to take it, look at it at a smaller, more micro level, and then invite investors to come in into the states to then develop it. But then you're now finding out that they cannot do it as quickly as they thought they could do it, because there's still one or two things that are not quite right with the development of the sector.
The chairman of NERC, the Electricity Regulatory Commission, for purposes of easy implementation, has inaugurated, I mean, there are long groups, but there are three, so I can't call out all the groups, but he has inaugurated 3 groups just for purposes of easy implementation. This seems not to have helped.
Yeah, and so we go back again to it's not the policy, it's not the implementation plan that is the issue, but you have to go and look at some of the details of it. Now, power is a value chain, right from the source of gas or electricity, whether it's solar, whether it's hydro, whether it's thermal, you have that. And there's a price that it costs to produce that. And then you have the cost of transmission. You must move it from where you produce it to where it's generated. You have the cost of generation, and then you have the cost of transmitting it from there to the distribution units, and then from the distribution units to the homes. So every part of this has a price point. At the end of the day, if the price that is taken by the consumer does not fit the entire price chain from beginning to the end, you're going to have a distortion of the ecosystem. And somehow, the pricing from beginning to the end has not been worked out adequately. And that's why you continue to have the issues that we have.
Pricing, maybe you need to break this down more. I mean, because as at today, Nigerians are actually suffering. I think I have somewhere that 57% of Nigerians, 57% of their money goes to electricity alone. 57%, that's a whopping figure.
And not just electricity, but producing electricity, whether it's by generators, whether it's by inverters, whether it's by solar, whether it's by the power companies, a huge amount of it goes into the payment of electricity bills. But then when you go into the back end of it, what do you have that is causing all of these high prices? You would have the price of the cost price of generating power. You have the cost price of producing the fuels that you need to generate the power. You have the cost of importation of inverters, batteries, and all of that, which are not produced locally. You have the parts for repairing generators, turbines, and all of that, which are not produced locally. All of these are dollar components that will translate at the end of the day to the cost of electricity. If you go to any country where electricity works properly, you will find one consistent thing. A lot of the parts, a lot of the competence going to produce the power is locally sourced, locally made, and you keep the price down. You have to keep the price of production down for the price of consumption to come down. If you cannot do that, you will continue having the problems that we have.
Locally made, locally consumed. There's so many things you're raising. One is wondering, why can't we then make these things or find a way to make it locally, so that these prices will come down, so that we can have electricity, so people can have deliverables of whether it's democracy or power generation and distribution?
Absolutely. And so this is where the whole issue of local content and then policies that are meant to aid this begin to come in. So you have companies that make cables, for example, that are local, but are they competitive enough for the government to support them, push them, enable them to become formidable in terms of local production of cables and exportation of cables? I have a friend who is opening up a solar panel factory in Nigeria. He has to be supported in such a way that he continues to grow at scale so that the price of solar can come down. You have if the government does not put in not just the policies, but enabling environment that allows local production of parts, of machineries, of turbines, of pipes. If you don't have those things in place, I'm sorry, you just will not be able to solve this problem. It then means that the price of electricity at the end of the value chain will have to be high.
And that's the million naira question. Is the government willing to do that, to encourage people, the legal framework, the right environment? But let's go on to some other thing. You mentioned generators, a nation of generators. Somebody described Nigeria as more than 60 million Nigerians own or use one. Do you believe that this has encouraged quick short-term fixes that has hindered attacking the grid problem at the root?
Well, again, so one, most people will look for the easiest option, and generators are an easy option for anybody who can afford it to provide their own power. But then from a government perspective, the amount of generators in Nigeria should be a crying shame. And it should be the policy of government to ensure that they reduce that number. Nigeria probably is one of the countries with the largest numbers of generators anywhere in the world that operate. Every house has to have a generator to survive. And that is not something that is tenable. It's not something that makes sense. And you can only drive that down by very deliberate long-term government policy dedicated to make sure that that is a key point. 0 generators over a 10-year period. And then you work assiduously to make sure that that happens. If you don't attack it properly, you would always have generators.
All right, let me go to this issue of, this is quite interesting. Approximately 250 manufacturers and academic institutions have opted out of the national grid for captive power. Captive power, that's what it is called. What does this portend? But Dangote alone, all of them put together, they're producing 6,500 megawatts. Dangote alone, 1,500 that can supply the needs of the entire Ibadan electricity company. What does this portend?
Okay, so interestingly, when you take a look at captive power, what you then find out is that those who operate within a captive power environment pay a higher tariff than those who are on the national grid. And what you're seeing there is that the producers of captive power can adequately and appropriately price their energy to the end users to make it viable. And so they then get good power, steady power at a premium. Unfortunately, the larger discos and larger gencos and all of that go up into the national grid, for lack of a better word, operate a subsidized environment because they're generating at a higher price, transmitting at a higher price, and selling at a discounted price. As long as that is the value chain that you see, where the price at the end does not match the price at the beginning, then you have a discount, you have a distorted market, and you cannot compete with the captive markets. The captive market has a better pricing structure and so operates a lot more efficiently.
In less than 1.5 minutes, I mean, there are so many issues to discuss, but certain things. The TCM MD, the TCM MD, Sule Abdulaziz, says despite tariff hike, power has remained relatively cheaper than what obtains in countries like Chad, Mali, Burkina Faso. Should we be comparing ourselves to other countries? Bear in mind that Nigeria has the lowest access to electricity globally, with about 92% lacking access to power.
No, so frankly, no, I don't think you should compare. You should compare yourself with other countries because you're not comparing apples to apples or oranges to oranges. Every country has its own unique issues. And I think what we should be doing in Nigeria is taking a look at it and saying that what we need to do is walk into the house at any point, anywhere, flip a switch, and we have electricity. How do we get there? What is the cost factor? What are the pain factors? What is the length of time that we're going to do that? What are the policies that we must put in place and implement to do it? That anybody, anywhere walks into their home and they flip a switch and light comes on. What will it take for us to get there? And I think that's the question, that's the central question that the president needs to ask. Call the GENCOs, call the DISCOs, call the transmission companies, call the independent producers and ask them this question. What would it take for a normal Nigerian without generators to walk into their house, flip a switch, and they would have light? And if you can tell me the solution, then we'll get to doing it. If you can do that, then we have a solution in play. Don't compare yourself to other countries. Just focus on fixing your country.
Tonye, what a fantastic place to live it. What should the president do when a Nigerian comes into his house? He flips a switch and you have light all over. Thank you so much. That's a fantastic place to leave it. I believe he has had you. And I want to believe they should work towards it. Thank you for your time on the program. Tonye Cole there, president of Sahara Group. Well, that's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Do join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Goodbye. Thank you for watching.